It's the start of 2024 and Star Citizen's Leak Discord has released an extensive report on what is going on behind the scenes at CIG, and there's some major plans in the works and even the mention of Star Citizen 1.0, as in the game's done. Or at least ready to ship. Now, as with anything with the leak label, this should be taken with a grain of salt, but it's hard not to put some weight into this report, and at the start they do mention that the information comes from multiple devs with at least one corroborating witness on each bit of info and or screenshot evidence. So take that for what it's worth, and let's get into some of these juicy details. Now, Pipeline has details on what essentially is an internal roadmap for CIG. The company used to make these roadmaps more public, but because they kept having to delay these features, they switched over to the new tracking system, which only lists what's coming in the next major patch rather than what's planned out for a year or more down the road. Now, I'm going to list out some of the early year stuff here and build up to a grand finale that you don't want to miss. Starting off in Q1, we can hopefully expect the 3.23 patch. This patch looks like it's going to get much more extensive. The goal is to contain as many Squadron 42 features as possible, with a meshing preview potentially. There was also an additional leak surrounding patch 3.23, which seems to indicate that there could be some form of base building here. It wasn't exactly sure how much base building. I would imagine it would be a very, very simplified version of it, but it indicated that there could be outposts, the potential for subterranean outposts, crafting furniture and things needed to make them function and homey, and also potentially the ability to buy land claims with Alpha UEC. And we might also get DLSS 2 and FSR with that patch. Apparently DLSS 3 has been more challenging, so that will come later, but any GPU upscaling tech would mean major performance improvements. And as wildly ambitious as that patch sounds, it does seem like it would be in line if CIG really does intend to release tons of these features this year. They got to start rolling them out fast, so maybe we'll get base building Q1. That would be pretty wild. Then we bump up to Q3, which would be Pyro. We already know that that is planned for the big 4.0 patch later this year. This would also include meshing, as in meshing's ready to deploy to the live server, resource network, and master modes. That all seems quite ambitious, as these systems are massive. I mean, as cool as base building is, it doesn't seem quite as monumental compared to some of these systems here. So that's exciting too. Hopefully they can hit that mark. Then in Q4, they listed out Planet Tech version 5. I'm not entirely sure what comes with that, but likely more evolutions to what was shown off at CitizenCon. Planets still need more work on rivers, water physics, atmospheric effects like rain, so it's probably finalizing Planet Tech to some degree. Then we hop in a time machine and zoom ahead in time almost 2 years from now to 2025 Q4, with the goal being Star Citizen 1.0. which would contain 5 systems on launch, Stanton, Pyro, and 3 other systems, and a deeper narrative experience. Now, obviously, this is the major bombshell of the report, and almost a meme within itself, considering it's another 2-year-long timeline, which has been the running joke with Star Citizen pretty much forever. Now, don't get me wrong, I find this info extremely exciting, and that they want to internally shift all their resources over and ramp up towards a 1.0 launch. And if you're a fan of the game, this is basically just good news. It's more content, more polish, more features. It's all improvements. It's just a lot to get done in that period of time. Honestly, based on CIG's past progress, I mean, imagining them being able to polish off the Stanton system experience within that time frame seems, like something that might actually just be challenging within itself. But again, that's based on the past, where most of the resources were focused on Squadron 42 and not the persistent universe. According to this leak report, up to around 300 devs have already been moved from Squadron 42 over to Star Citizen, and the remainder of the Squadron 42 teams have been restructured into strike groups to polish out the remainder of that game. Now, this report goes on to examine what Star Citizen 1.0 entails, and the writer also shares in the skepticism of all the goals being met by end of year 2025. So beyond what was already stated, what is Star Citizen 1.0? Well, apparently it would be a 10 times increase in the in-game activities. That's a lot of activities and mission groups. I've seen previous plans for the increased mission scope of the game, but a 10 times increase is a lot any way you slice it. Then there's the new narrative experience, which is described as having a similar scope to Squadron 42, a handcrafted experience that will introduce players to basically the world of Star Citizen at 10 to 20 hours of gameplay. And in some ways this sounds similar to other MMOs where you have your main character quest, and this will also rely on instancing to a certain degree. Instancing being where you create sort of a separate safe server environment for players running through some of the newbie content so their experience can't be ruined by players who are trying to troll or PvP or something. Now honestly, this sounds great in concept. Star Citizen has become so complex that getting into the experience right now is pretty tough. So a more narrative style introduction that's maybe kind of like your main quest in an MMO to help you get familiar with the basics makes a ton of sense. A brisk 10 to 20 hour long tutorial. And apparently instancing is going to become a much bigger part of the project moving forward, used for raid content such as distribution facilities, personal facilities like your hangars, and narrative focused missions such as ones where you have to interact with hero NPCs and you wouldn't want other players coming along and, I don't know, killing them before you can finish the mission. Now, I hope all of this information is true. I've said in the past that I think Star Citizen needs to integrate more instancing systems. As much as I love the giant sim experience, the majority of players will want and need some sort of shielding from the always-on game world. And instancing is a really useful tool for this. Raids are probably the best example. You want to get together with a group of friends and run some high-level missions. Well, you might run into some other players on your way to the mission, but once you land and get into an instance hangar bay, now you're separated from the rest of the bigger world and you can focus on the mission at hand rather than having to worry about somebody blowing up your ship on the surface while you're in an underground facility. This would also give CIG a lot more freedom in crafting out detailed narrative missions. Since narrative content in a massive multiplayer server is extremely challenging, as was already shown by Siege of Orison and some of the other big game events, small scale events can have fun things triggered at just the right moments to great effect. Now that's some pretty juicy leaks for this start of the year. Honestly, it seems kind of in line with what CIG used to show us in terms of their upcoming plans for the game to sort of build hype, but it just sort of backfired on them too much with missing those deadlines. So this sort of seems like the internal indicator of their roadmap just being leaked to the public. And frankly, the 3.23 patch will give us a good indicator of how accurate, or I should say reliable, this information is. Again, this report cited that, these are internal goals, not like deadlines or anything like that, and that CIG, I would assume, is purposely not releasing this information officially because, it's a 2-year out deadline. They're notorious for missing deadlines. This is more of a internal development goal. And if anything, this leak makes for some fun reading and potential speculation. I will leave a link to the leak document down below if you guys want to read through it all for yourself. I think I covered all the major stuff here though. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave me a like, hit that subscribe button, ding the notification bell to beat the YouTube algorithm with me, and up next, if you want to watch another video on game dev stuff, I've started working on my own spaceship game. You can check that out here. We just started at the beginning of the new year, and the next devlog is coming out pretty soon. As always, guys, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. This is Level Cap, signing off.